Welcome to the entrance of the historic Strand Arcade, a charming strip that connects George Street and Pitt Street. This lovely old-fashioned shopping mall was built in 1891, and it was named after the famous London street, the Strand, that links the City of London and the City of Westminster. Now, the Strand was originally financed by a group of prominent Sydney businessmen, and they were led by a tobacco tycoon in Sydney named Sir Hugh Dixon. A design competition was held to create it, and the winning entry was for an arcade just over 100 metres long in the free classical Victorian style with 80 shop fronts, and it was going to have 4 floors, basement, ground floor, 2 gallery levels, and then an additional level on both street fronts. The Strand was actually the last of 5 covered shopping arcades that were built between the early 1880s and the early 1890s in the busy city centre. But today it's the only one that still remains. But once upon a time we had the Royal Arcade, which is now the site of the Hilton Hotel between George and Pitt Street. We also had the Victoria Arcade, the Piccadilly Arcade, and the Imperial Arcade. The Victorian arcade style like this really provided pedestrian space inside off streets that were becoming progressively busy, noisy, trams, foot traffic, horses, carts, everything still going by. So these really provided shelter for pedestrians and goods, especially out of the sun, out of the rain, and at a time where people wanted to not just shop, but to peruse and see and be seen. As you walk down the Strand, you can notice some of its beautiful ornate architecture. It was constructed of brick with cast iron roof structures. It has cantilevered protruding galleries. All of the shops are timber framed, and in some way all of the shops look like a row of Victorian terrace houses all lined up with those lovely glass windows so you can peer inside. And then magnificent cedar staircases at each end which lead up to the second and third floor galleries. The galleries, of course, being linked by that lovely central bridge. The richly tiled mosaic floors below you were very fashionable at the time, and these ones were a particular favourite of Sydneysiders. The late night shopping experience was really something at the time, because the Strand was one of the first places in the city to be lit with electricity inside. So the evenings had a prominent flow of people who were just enjoying the bright lights and all of the shop window fronts. But with expensive stores, particularly jewellers inside, the Strand was a target for thieves. Over the course of its history, it's had many robberies inside, and they started almost from the beginning. There was quite a daring one in 1895, and detectives were on the scene and thought it might be an inside job because there was no sign of a break-in or a forced entry or anything into the safe, but turned out to be one of these very swift-handed customers who had pulled it off knowing exactly what they were doing. In the 1920s, the Strand Arcade gained a whole new aspect when essentially a nightclub called the Ambassador's Cafe moved into the basement of the building. This nightclub was apparently opened after a man about town and also quite a rich Sydney jeweller named Percy Stewart Dawson got kicked out from another hotel and vowed that he would never be kicked out of a venue again because he would open his own and be the proprietor of somewhere that he could invite all of his fashionable friends. The Ambassador's Cafe was a hotspot during the roaring 1920s in Sydney. The club housed a large, extravagantly decorated ballroom which could seat 700 people and a small palm court which was mainly used for luncheons and afternoon tea dances. So all of the society types would flock there. Another nightclub moved in by the 1950s into that space, and this was called Checkers Nightclub. Checkers Nightclub provided dinner and a show and had flashy dancing girls on stage. So just imagine that about 70 years ago in the basement of the Strand, where you've got retail stores today, you could find yourself in the middle of a cabaret show with cocktails, and this was all happening after midnight. So it really was quite the spot in the city, not just for shopping, but to go out and have some fun. However, it wasn't all good times at the Strand, and in fact, in 1976 at about 3 a.m., a fire broke out within the arcade, and all of a sudden the building was an inferno. It took about 100 firefighters to come and try and put out the blaze. It went on for hours, and the interior, which was mostly made of wood with all of those shop fronts, was left as a ruin. So this was a big old problem. The Strand itself, for the last few years, needed some repairs, but all of a sudden it had gone up in smoke, so there's a real question mark about its future. Luckily, Sydney rallied behind the Strand after the destruction of the fire, and there was a real sense of bringing it back to its historic charm. Within 1 year, a meticulous restoration job took place, bringing in original cedar and bringing it back to its former glory. The entire place was refitted, everything was given a nice shiny coat, and very quickly the shopkeepers came roaring back, and so did the public. In the upper floors, you'll still find master tailors plying their trade. There are jewellers, repair shops, chocolatessence, and there's the nut store, which has been operating in the Strand since 1939 and came back straight after the fire. So aside from anything else, it's fantastic, I think, to just wander through and get a real feeling of what it was like to be in Sydney at the end of the 19th century at this time of opulence.